What's up, guys? It's Agent What If, and I'm back again. I know this is probably kind of weird because I've been gone for like I don't even know how long. I haven't even been keeping track. But the point is, it's been a while since I made my last video. But I'm going to try to get back on schedule, and get back to uploading. Thank you guys so much for the subscribers because we're over 1,000 now, and I appreciate it. And I just wanted to let you guys know that I really did appreciate it. Also, thank you guys so much on pretty much everything. Y'all guys are just the best for whatever reason. I really don't know why y'all even like me, but it's whatever. But anyway, let's get right into this story. So without any further ado, let's begin. We start off with Izuku being born. Everything is the exact same as canon, to the letter. Hisashi leaves, Inko's still a single mom, and Deku is obsessed with being a hero, except one critical change. When Izuku turns 4 years old, and he does go to the Quirk doctor, with all of that hyper energy that he has with his All Might doll, he's told that he does have a quirk. He's told that he inherited a quirk from his father. Everyone is interested in this because Inko didn't know that Hisashi actually had a quirk because he never used it. So she didn't actually know that he had a quirk. She thought he was quirkless, and she thought that that was why Izuku may or may not be quirkless. But anyway, with Izuku hearing this news, he was ecstatic like any kid with a toy would be. So he was extraordinarily happy. After a couple hours of running some tests, they figured out that Izuku has the ability to breathe fire. That his body can intake oxygen and ignite the oxygen inside of his lungs and expel it at extremely high temperatures. His quirk is said to be around 3 to 4 times stronger than his father's was, because they do have all of the quirks that are registered on record. So they do know that Hisashi's quirk, and that's why they can directly compare it. So, with hearing this, Izuku is ecstatic. He's over the moon. He realizes that his goal is within reach. A few days later, we see Izuku at school. Now, this is where the major changes start to change. Because Izuku has a quirk, his heroism skyrockets. He immediately starts thinking that he is destined to be a hero, and he's going to be the greatest hero since All Might. Naturally, this means his confidence is higher and he doesn't mutter as much as he used to because he's not a failure in the eyes of most people. Another change is that Katsuki, yes, Katsuki, because Bakugo is a female in this, Katsuki is still pretty much the same, except Izuku demands more respect. He just won't take Katsuki's crap. So when she has an attitude and gets angry, like, he can step up right there with her because they have the most powerful quirks in their I don't even know where they would be at. I don't even remember. That's probably like preschool because they're 4, and so yeah, they're probably not even first grade. So it's probably preschool. Everyone always showers them with compliments about how powerful their quirks are, and Katsuki doesn't really like this. She doesn't like that she has competition, considering the fact that she has a more dominant personality and doesn't like that there's someone who can oppose her. But Izuku doesn't really care. He's only focused on being a hero. He's pretty much training his quirk every single day to make sure that he's as powerful as he can be. Katsuki continues with her bully-like mentality, except this time the people around her, they're actually forced to be there. No one wants to be around her because they consider Deku to be like the cooler version of her. So all the people that hang around her, she's actively forcing them to stay. She begins picking on a quirkless girl that hasn't awakened her quirk yet, and she continues. Her goons try to tell her to stop, but every time they say something, an explosion lights up in her hand and they back away scared. Izuku, as calm as he's gotten because he's been using his quirk a lot, so he's actually a lot more confident in himself, he just walks over to Katsuki and he asks her what she's doing. She then says that Midoriya should leave because, this has nothing to do with him. Izuku asks her once again, "What is it that you're doing, Katsuki?" And she says that there's a quirkless child right here and she wants to bully her, basically. Izuku asks her why, and Katsuki doesn't really answer the question. She just gets angry at him and says because, and tries to use her quirk to put an explosion right in his face. Izuku, seeing this, breathes a bit of fire back to counter her explosion so that she doesn't actually hit his face. She retracts her arm quickly as some steam can be seen, a little sizzle. Izuku then looks at her with a serious look, as it's almost as if his entire face has blackened to the point where she can't see it except for his glowing green eyes and the fire that's coming out of the sides of his mouth. He asks her that if she's supposed to be a hero one day, she can't act like a villain because heroes don't bully people. Katsuki is a little shook by this because she never really expected anybody to tell her something. She's pretty much been allowed to do whatever she wanted to do because of her quirk, so she's never really had anybody tell her that what she was doing was wrong. She began to get upset again and just ended up walking off. After that, a couple days later, she came back and she said she was sorry. Izuku didn't have a problem with this because he's much like All Might. He's always smiling, he's always happy. He forgave her easily. They became friends. Now we have our first real time skip. This is around to the age when Izuku first goes to UA, which I'm pretty sure is around when Izuku was around like 15 or something. I don't know if that's precisely accurate, but I'm gonna go with that number, or if it's not, sorry, fill that age in for yourself. So anyway, we go to Izuku and Katsuki sitting in their school. The teacher walks in the door with a bored, deadpan expression like normal, like he hates his job. And he walks over to the desk and sighs. He asks everyone if they filled out the paper that he gave them 20 minutes ago. They all say yes, and he says, good. I would ask a question, such as what you want to be when you grow up, but everyone here wants to be a hero, I'm assuming, and everyone immediately starts flashing their quirks. A small smile breaks through his face, and he says, all right, now everyone calm down. That's when Katsuki slams her hand down on the desk saying, what do you mean we all want to be heroes? Let's be honest. Not to be rude, but most of these guys would be lucky to end up being some D-lister sidekick. They're not going to be anybody. It's just the way it is. Everyone immediately looks at Katsuki, but they kind of realize she's right. Most of them have pretty weird and unusable quirks in combat. Izuku then says, Katsuki, you don't have to be that blunt. Just because their quirks don't seem useful to you doesn't mean that they can't be a hero. Even if it's not good for combat, they can still be heroes. Everyone brightens up a little bit, but Katsuki just sits down, huffing, saying, whatever, Deku. You always say that to everybody, but you're just too scared to admit the fact that some people are born powerful and some people are born weak. Anyway, after this, they're dismissed from class as Izuku begins walking home. Katsuki walks right behind him, pestering him as she often does. Ever since he confronted her about her actions as a child, she stuck to him like glue. Izuku doesn't really care because they always practice anyway. Izuku asks her if they're going to be going to UA, and she says that she's going to apply to UA and that he should too because she needs him to be her sidekick. Izuku says, no, I'm not going to be anyone's sidekick. You should know that already. I'm going to be the number one hero. They go back and forth for a little bit until they eventually reach Izuku's door. He pulls out his keys and unlocks the door, seeing his mother in the kitchen fixing something. He smiles at her and says, hi, Mom, and Katsuki says, hi, Miss Midoriya, and everything's great. They sit down and eat dinner before Izuku walks Katsuki back home. We then skip to the 10-month training between when they left school to go to UA. They don't really do much training since they've been training a lot since they've been around each other, so they don't really need to train. We pretty much skip all the way to the practical exam because Izuku was already intelligent, so if Izuku had confidence in himself, he would easily pass all of the other challenges. So yeah, no point in even discussing that. Anyway, once we get to the practical exam, everybody's on the starting line, and President Mike says, go, did you think I was going to count down? There aren't situations like that in actual combat. Everyone begins to run. Izuku is more at a sedate jog instead of a run, while Katsuki is blasting off forward. Everyone's in the observation box is observing as Izuku's just jogging. A robot, a two-pointer, immediately jumps in front of Izuku, and Izuku whistles, and everyone just sees a giant hole in between the robot. Izuku continues moving on, and he just starts sniping robots before people can even attack them. There are some people who are engaged in combat, and he'll just whistle, and a small fireball about the size of a fist will just go through robots at very quick paces. Izuku's eliminating robots left and right without any care, with his hands in his pockets. After a little while, the zero pointer comes and everyone begins to run in the other direction. Izuku sees a girl who's about to get hit by some debris, and he pulls her out of the way, and the debris hits the ground. She breathes heavily, saying, "Thank you. I didn't catch your name." Izuku says, "Now's not really the time to discuss that. There's a giant robot after us." Katsuki begins to use her explosions to blow back her to move herself back to the starting line to away from the zero pointer. After the test ends, Izuku gets 10th place with his scores and does pretty well. Safe to say he gets in. Katsuki does 2nd place, and Izuku's just fine with that. He receives his message and is allowed to come to UA. Then we skip to when Izuku walks to the gates. Him and Katsuki are walking at a very sedate pace. Everyone is staring at them, considering that both of them are in the top 10 people to get the best scores in the practical exam. And no one really knows what Izuku's quirk is, because every time they would look back, nothing would happen. He'd just be jogging with his hands in his pockets, and then a hole would appear. Some of them think that it's some kind of wind quirk, or maybe he can control machines or metal. They don't really know what it is. Izuku continues walking on his way, and he sees Ochako. He says hi to her, taking his hands out of his pocket, reached for a little while. Katsuki is a bit disturbed by the fact that he's acknowledging her presence, because he doesn't do that for most people. Katsuki just grunts and continues walking. They make their way in, and they get their little speech about everything, and they're eventually sent to their classes. Izuku's pretty calm, just sitting in class and going through mostly normal classes until about after a week they're given, and I know that it wasn't actually a week, but I'm going to say a week because I actually have a reason for that. Anyway, Eraserhead tells them that they are going to go out and test their quirks today. Everyone seems a bit excited, and Izuku just smirks, thinking that it's finally time for him to shine. So anyway, Izuku just goes out with everybody else. And yes, I'm going to ignore that. I'm not going to talk about that noise that just happened. So yeah, it did happen, but I'm not going to acknowledge it. Anyway, so they go outside and they all get ready. And they do go in order of who got the highest scores. But instead of the normal tests they had in physicality, Aizawa then tells them that the main factor about being a hero is your quirk and how powerful it is and how you know how to use it. We need to know where you're at with your quirks in order to see how far you need to go in order to get strong enough to be a hero. He tells them that their physical capabilities can be improved upon while they're here, but their quirks sometimes they don't get stronger. So he needs to know where everyone's at and who needs the most work. Eventually, they get to Izuku, and Aizawa then tells him, all right, Mr. Midoriya, it's your turn. What I want you to do is use your quirk at full blast, as much as you can do. And Izuku nods, having his hands in his pockets. He walks up to a clearing and tells Aizawa that he should tell everyone to step back because it's about to get really hot. He takes his hands out of his pockets, and that's when Katsuki steps back a couple steps. Her eyes widen a bit because she never actually saw him do that. Only a couple times when they were training, and almost all of the time he's going to go all out. Izuku takes a very deep breath, and everyone notices that it's getting harder to breathe. And then they realize it's not getting harder to breathe. Izuku's sucking all of the air out of where they are. Everyone's starting to get a little lightheaded. That's when Izuku's throat starts to glow with an orangish kind of tint to it. And he cocks his head back and blows out a huge torrent of flames 40 feet ahead of him. And it's 100 feet wide. And he holds that for 2 minutes and 30 seconds. After he does that, everyone is astonished because that was him going all out, and everyone's pretty shocked. Aizawa says, "Good, it seems like you have a decent handle on your core abilities." And that's when Izuku goes back and, sits back into his class. Everyone else does theirs, but they're not really worth talking about. Katsuki does the exact same thing. not the exact same thing as Izuku, but she pretty much uses a giant, consistent wave of explosions for about 2 minutes. Not the full 30 seconds. Not the extra 30 seconds that Izuku did, though. After this, they're told that they're going to have normal classes for a little while because he needs to process all of this and build a special regiment to train all of them. So they do normal classes for about 2 weeks. And then, when everyone's making their way into class 1A, a man, a very buff guy, busts through the door and says, "Never fear, because I am here." The man now recognizes All Might, gets a reaction out of everybody, of course, not all the good reactions. Some of them are like, "What is this guy doing?" And other ones are like, "Oh my god, it's All Might." Anyway, All Might pretty much explains that there's going to be a hero-villain test in one of the practice cities that UA has. They eventually make their way out there, and it's been 15 minutes. They're standing there, and All Might decides that he's not going to make them pick teams. He's going to do it at random. After the random selection is done, it's Izuku and Katsuki on the villain team, and Todoroki and Kirishima on the hero team. Izuku just has his hands in his pockets and he walks up there. He leans over his head a little bit and he tells Katsuki that she's going to have to handle the bomb because his quirk isn't really handled for that. His quirk is better for wide range attacks and one-on-one attacks, not defending. He's not very mobile, so he knows that he can't do it the best. Katsuki nods and uses her explosions to go up to the first floor because they're outside of the building, so she uses her explosions to go to an open window at the top floor, easily getting to the bomb. Izuku just sits waiting on the first floor for the first person to come in. After 5 minutes of preparation is done, we see that Todoroki bursts through the door. He looks and sees that it's Izuku right there, and he immediately shoots a wave of ice. Izuku burns it easily without any confrontation. Kirishima comes behind him, and he slams his hand down, making a lot of debris come up and a lot of smoke. He makes his way up the stairs while Todoroki is left behind to face Izuku. Izuku and Todoroki just stand there for a bit, and Todoroki continues trying to freeze Izuku, but he continuously melts the ice with ease. Todoroki's getting a little bit agitated, so he amps his power up a couple notches and tries to freeze the entire room in one go. Izuku lets out a deep breath of fire that burns all of the ice, and he continues holding it while Todoroki's forced on a defensive, trying to keep his wall of ice up. Meanwhile, Katsuki and Kirishima are actually at the top fighting. Kirishima can't really do much because, first of all, Katsuki's way too mobile for him to hit her, and even if he could, he wouldn't be able to do much because he's currently being assaulted by hundreds of explosions to his face consistently. She's just blowing him back while she's walking forward. He's trying to block it, but his hardening is coming off, and eventually she hits him so hard with an explosion that she actually knocks him out of the wall, and he falls all the way back down to the first floor. Izuku and Todoroki are still holding their standoff, but eventually Izuku gets tired of it and he stops. He breathes a deep breath and he lets out a huge fireball that's almost the size of the entire room. Todoroki tries to use his ice to protect himself in an ice dome, but it wasn't meant to be because it explodes as soon as it hits the ice wall and sends Todoroki and Kirishima, who is about to come inside, flying out back. At this point, time runs out and the villains win. With that, I think I'm going to end this episode. If you guys want to see a part 2 of this, because I'm pretty sure I'm going to make a series about this. I like this with it, so I'm probably going to make a series out of this. If you guys want to see that, hit the like button, the subscribe button, all of that other cool stuff. So yeah, without any further ado, peace.